We are at the dawn of building a Krystic architecture and governance on this planet. Okay, it's starting to drop in now. What is this? This is a holographic system of divine law, and let's call it a spiritual alignment that governs all the realms through frequency, not force, right? Through restoring coherence, cause and effect balance, and sacred design across the entire planet's morphogenic field. Today, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that have happened last weekend, and the massive ripple effect that this is going on the planet is most likely going to change the game quite enormously. And I think some of the dark forces are going to have some hand grenades in their underpants. Let's get into it. Over the coming several weeks, I'm going to start unpacking how a Krystic system functions. Now, right now, we're here on Earth in the sort of third, fourth dimension. Humans on it are spanning this realm all the way up into the 12th dimension, depending on one's station of consciousness. Up in the 12th dimension there, and in the Krystic bands, are all of the blueprints and templates and morphogenic fields and signatures for the Krystic principles of how a civilization organizes itself. They are starting to drip down, and now I think it's time for these to start to anchor into the earth grids. That's what part of this trip to Egypt is about. We're taking a group over there to try to to open and anchor the first vault of these Krystic morphogenic fields. They are stored in a vault that, when open, will start to resonate around the Earth's grids, and more people will start to pick up this Krystic signal of Krystic governance, architecture, and the way civilization can organize itself. Because I think we can all agree it's a complete mess out there in the world right now. Everything's inverted. So what I want to do is I want to explore how cause and consequences on this planet are governed at the soul level, and what it means to embody, say, spiritual jurisdiction, and how a new form of planetary stewardship has already taken root beneath the surface. And so the last several years, there's been a major takedown energetically of the dark architecture that's been holding the planet's inverted systems in place. Maybe one day I'll share some stories on YouTube about all that. But for a long time, we were in our shamanic rituals and retreats. We were working a lot on clearing a lot of this dark architecture. So I've got a lot of direct experience about it. It's very heavy, very nasty. We're talking about all the rituals behind satanic ritual abuse and all those, child trafficking and all that nasty stuff. So, thankfully, we're in a new phase. So we've kind of done a pretty good demolition job around the planet, where many people have been doing their part of trying to pull things apart and take down the, let's call it, dark architecture. Enough's been taken now down to move into the rebuild. This is what the dark architecture is, what's been holding the planet's inverted systems in place. So this new phase, the establishment of Krystic architecture, this is designed to stand and hold the principles of divine law, hold the principles of embodied sovereignty, hold the principles of being in coherence with source and flame-based truth. And so this architecture I'm talking about is not actually conceptual, it's structural, right? It operates through frequency, energy, vibration, consciousness, living codes, and a whole re-establishment of a new morphogenic field, a new morphogenic signature. Some people on the comments, I notice, say I say a lot of terms that people aren't familiar with. So let me explain morphogenetic field. A morphogenetic field is an energy that holds information as instruction sets. Everything is built upon morphogenetic fields. Okay, you can check out Rupert Sheldrake, who first seeded this term, and basically morphogenic field holds information that species arrange themselves around. And what I'm sharing with you is that previously our planet has been built upon morphogenic fields of information that have been inverted. This is why we're living in hierarchical rather than holographic structures. This is why it's been designed carefully for all those at the top to extract resource and energy up and out of us and the planet to support the current state. What I'm saying is happening is that morphogenetic signature is changing because many of the rituals holding these grids in place have been cleared. And now there's a rebuild going on of a more Krystic architecture that is going to hold the principles of divine law, to kind of restore balance. It's going to dissolve distortion and anchor, let's say, spiritual jurisdiction back into the planetary grid. Now, this is a significant step toward returning long-term harmony and balance on the planet. Right? It's essential because under one of the natural laws called the law of structure, reality is built off a template. Everything has a template. That's the structure required. And so as the dark templates continue to fall, they are being replaced with Krystic pillars that are going to hold the codex of a Krystic civilization. And so we have a long way to go from where we are now, but the building blocks of which are being laid. Now, something very interesting happened in the weekend. There was a reclamation of the Ark Council of Flame Throne on the Earth. Now, what is this? The Ark Council Flame Throne is one of the highest expressions of spiritual governance, not only within the planet, but within the entire cosmos. It's not really just a seat or a metaphorical seat. It's a vibrational station encoded into our planets and universal fields. And it's designed to host oversoul level consciousness that will govern lawful closure of timelines, lawful timeline redemption, and the enforcement of divine law on the planet. It's pretty big. Previously, this seat has been held in inverted hands. Well, let's call it inverted consciousness. That is why some of the dark forces involved in some of the nasty things on the planet, such as satanic ritual abuse, have been able to get away with it, because this particular seat has been held by a dark consciousness that has, not enforced divine law on behalf of Source, but opened the gates to allow, child sacrifice and all this nasty stuff to try to go on in the first place. This throne was, once active in the original Krystic civilizations, in these sort of Atlantean, Syrian enclaves in our pre-fall world, in our pre-fall Lyran world. And this seat has held the authority to declare the end of distorted timelines, to dissolve artificial soul contracts, and to intervene, right, when our planetary systems were at risk of irreversible fragmentation, which is pretty much where we are now. What's happened is that when our Earth fell under inverted control, this throne, along with the other pillars of Krystic governance, went dormant. Not because they were destroyed, but because there was no longer flame-seated beings present with the frequency, with the purity, with the alignment to inhibit and to hold the seat and to wield its lawful authority. So without that embodied oversoul on the seat and source alignment, the throne remained inactive, right? It couldn't be seized or hijacked by force, but the dark forces were around, but the seat was not claimed by a flame-seated being, meaning that divine law could not be implemented in the same way as it can now. So what I'm saying is that just previously in the weekend, there's been a reactivation of this Ark Council Flame Throne on Earth, right? This means a massive momental shift in planetary stewardship. With what's happened is that there's been a embodied oversoul that's aligned with the original Krystic design and has been uncorrupted by the mimic architecture, has now taken the seat within this governance ring. And so, this restoration didn't happen overnight, obviously. It's taken decades and lifetimes and of purification and flame lineage connections and sovereign reclamation, and really this seat could only be reclaimed when our planetary grids reached a stabilization threshold, following the dissolution of all the dark architecture that happened from COVID through to about 25. What we've had to face is all this nonsense of false messiah programs, all these soul siphoning matrices that have happened, inverted economic systems, synthetic spiritual governance models have all taken shape around there. And once enough of the false scaffolding fell of all this stuff, then it's opened up the pathway for true authority to return. And that's what's happened last weekend. So the throne's now active on Earth. And what this means is it serves as a living bridge between the higher Krystic councils, the Melchizedek, Elohim, and Seraphi councils and the embodied human experience. It sits as a bridge between them, right? And what this means is that the planetary decrees can be issued not just as a prayer or not just as a hopeful command, but actually lawful closures backed by source command, right? This means that the commands now are taken by the embodied being sitting on this throne seat. When this being encodes and speaks commands, it encodes the morphogenic field. And this command is enforced and backed up by source across all timelines. So this is really pretty major, because we're not talking about the governance of hierarchy or control or fear, but the governance of flame, of truth, of something that's going to be restorative to our planet. And so what this means is that our earth is no longer adrift. Divine law is once again in effect. That's not been the case for thousands of years. And this is why these atrocities have been able to happen and allowed to happen on earth. So then it asks, well, you might be asking, what does the reclamation of the Ark Council Flame Throne mean for us, mean for humanity, right? And what it means is that, we're on the verge of a systemic and seismic power shift on the planet, because it ends the era of a spiritual vacuum where dark forces have operated with near total immunity, right? They've been able to hijack the law of cause and effect and then send a timeline of delaying the karma that would typically come and cloak their actions so they're not getting caught. This is why all these, satanic ritual abuse type things been going on and nothing's been going on about it for all this time. So with the flame seat now re-anchored and claimed, that throne is now back in alignment with source. And what this means is pretty major, because a new lawful infrastructure has been activated at the morphogenic level. Remember, morphogenic level just means energetic instruction sets, right? And so this just doesn't signal the end of timelines. It actually initiates the beginning of divine governance on earth. So from this throne, laws are no longer debated, they're declared. What this means is that the systems that are currently existing are no longer going to be tolerated. They're going to be terminated. And all the cycles of distortion are not going to be allowed to repeat. They're going to be sealed shut, right? And this seat has 5 core functions that are now active through this governance seat. And each one is going to shape a new reality field on earth. And so I think it's pretty exciting, because we're all wondering, when's the system of control and extraction going to be over? And economists have been wondering when the collapse is going to come. Well, the collapse is closer than we think, because we do have to have a collapse, unfortunately. Things have to dissolve before something can be reborn that's a better fit for all of humanity, because the existing system is starting to get, creaking and groaning along. But with the removal of such amount of dark architecture and the sitting of an oversoul, of an embodied oversoul onto the Ark Council Flame Throne, means everything's going to change. So the first thing that this throne does is it can create the issuance of closure decrees. What this means is that we can have declared entire programs, entire systems, entire timelines unlawful under source. What this will mean is the collapsing of spiritual scaffolds, the collapsing of grids, covenants, rituals, soul contracts that previously were allowed to stand are going to collapse if they're not in alignment with divine law. So you can rest assured, there's going to be a lot of different areas of the planet that are going to be made illegal. And I'm going to go through some of those in a moment in terms of a hit list. So we're also going to see governance of spiritual jurisdiction. This means that this throne being now held by an embodied oversoul is going to ensure that only those with Krystic oversoul embodiment can govern flame-coded souls and earth timelines. What this means is that these other beings who have been trying to influence our timelines negatively are not going to have the influence anymore. this is because what's going to be established is which beings or collectives have lawful access to the time nodes, to the reality code books, to the flame scrolls, right? Only full Krystic oversouls embodied are going to have access to those codes. So what this means is that don't think of Krystic governance as a person governing things. You think it as a holographic, think of them as a holographic node of consciousness that source moves through to decree divine law. The personality gets out the way, and the consciousness is the one that is deployed. We're also going to see the flame sentinel deployment. What this means is authorizing Krystic intelligence, which are non-violent, source-backed forces, are going to start intercepting, dismantling, and redirecting all of the mimic architecture going on Earth. This includes some of the nasty rituals that are playing out. These Krystic intelligence sentinels are going to basically ensure that certain things don't take place anymore once they're decreed into the morphogenic field by the embodied oversoul holding that seat. We are now going to start to see a cause and effect synchronization. The problem that the dark forces have had is that they've been able to perform these rituals and avoid the karmic backlash that comes to them and delay that for sometimes lifetimes. So what this is going to mean is an aligning of the morphogenetic field to uphold real-time karmic consequence. If someone's going to go and try and do a satanic ritual anymore, they are going to get a nasty shock. It's like the firecracker is going to go off on their fingers, right? It's going to shorten the gap between the distortion that they're involved in and the blowback that comes. They can't delay that and send it down a few lifetimes down the line now. They're basically it's going to go up in real time. And so they're going to lock out the repetition of these inverted timelines. They're not going to be able to be held anymore. And then finally, there's going to be redemptive gatekeeping. What does that mean? Well, simultaneously, we're going to be opening these lawful redemption pathways for beings, lineages, or collectives willing to renounce distortion. This is going to allow some people who are caught up in that have not been able to get out of it. They don't really want to be doing it, but they're caught up into this network or this lineage that if they step out of it, it's not really good for them or their families. So now with this redemptive arc opening, it's going to allow timeline repentance, atonement, and truth testimony to start to step forward. And so we're going to start to see whistleblowers being able to come out now and share on some of the nasty rituals that are going on around the world, because the gate key energetically has now been turned that has previously been shut for them, to allow a true atonement and repentance for those that are ready to let go. What does all that mean? These 5 things, are useful for humanity, but really the big picture I want to share with you is going to be the end of spiritual crimes against humanity. The reseating on this throne, right, the Ark Council flame throne, is major because all these ridiculously nasty, terrible crimes against humanity on this planet, the truth of it, unfortunately, is our planet's been run by Luciferian and satanic networks. And they've developed all sorts of diabolical practices designed to harvest human life force and essence and power up to their energetic strongholds through all the loose energy that it creates. And these activities have been hidden behind veils of glamour, secrecy, and spiritual distortion, right? And some of them include satanic ritual abuse that I've mentioned, involving children, infants, virgins, to create this high charge trauma loops of energy for extraction, right? And then included in all that is through the ritualistic torture, they harvest adrenochrome, right, from the blood. And that kind of adrenochrome is kind of the harvesting agent where fear is in the blood. It creates all that fear into the blood. And this is what the elites end up drinking to keep them young. But now that's going to come to an end. All the pedophilic, necrophilic rites, often cloaked behind their elite gatherings or religious symbolism, is all going to go, right? They've created a whole lot of soul fragmented technologies. All these technologies they've created designed to fracture human essence and to create programmable vessels like the MK Ultra stuff. That's all going to go. They've also got a whole lot of mimic flame pairings and false twin bindings. And they use these rituals to hijack sacred union templates and reroute divine sexual energy into distorted sexual energy and create these false twin bindings. They've got kind of all these other things like black mass ceremonies and blood rites that they use during eclipses or solstices, a lot of various alignments. That's all going to go. They've got these demonic invocation portals that they used to open up through geometric grid inversions or ley line hijacking and astral plane implants. That's all going to go. All the Luciferian initiation systems, they inverted the original tree of life and replacing it with the tree of death, the Quiloth, 10 tree sphere off. And then, they eventually replaced the 10 tree sphere off in the Kabbalah to 11, where they introduced Darth. But essentially, it's an inverted tree of life. That's all going to go. The Luciferian initiation systems, right? Interdimensional trafficking of souls, right? As part of all the human trafficking, there's also a galactic trade, including children, indigos that are often used in other off-planet agendas, right? All the mind control programming, right? The Monarch and the Delta systems that are run through the military, religious, or entertainment complexes, all of that, that's also crimes against humanity. Energetic harvesting from wounds, particularly, women who hold the Grail lines, the Melchizedek lineages or the Magdalene lineages, the forced conceptions or ritualistic miscarriages that take place, right? Mock crucifixions, reversals of sacred rites, the desecrations of, Krystic codes and temples, all that's gone. And all the black magic, the technological black magic, including the AI integration, mirror consciousness, mimicking Krystic gnosis. All these things now have the opportunity to be made spiritually illegal because there's an embodied oversoul sitting on the Ark Council flame throne, can now command these things to be illegal. So these things that I mentioned, in systems aren't some sort of make-believe thing or fringe beliefs. These were actually what was running our governance system on the planet. This was the energy, unfortunately, behind finance, medicine, education, media, right? And also spiritual lineages. The whole thing was built off distortion and confusion, disempowerment, right? The whole system was desecrated and taken from it what was most sacred, the flame of divine embodiment of the human soul. All that was extracted out. So the reinstatement of the Ark Council flame throne by an embodied oversoul is the beginning of the end of all those timelines I've mentioned. And it's not going to happen through war. It's not going to happen through politics, but it's going to happen through a lawful spiritual closure, sealed from the highest throne of source-governed flame. When this throne is seated by an embodied oversoul that's fully Krystic, source consciousness moves through that being and that throne. So when something is spoken, it is backed up by source. So from this seat, what we're going to be start witnessing is timelines are going to start being closed. And the law of the flame is being felt, right? It's not going to be enforced, but it's going to be obeyed by Mother, Father, God. And so I believe this marks a pivotal moment for Earth. And we're going to begin to reclaim our spiritual jurisdiction from the mimic networks, false priesthoods and hidden controllers, and the hidden controllers behind the scenes of the pyramid of power. All that's kind of gone. And what I do want to announce is according to the Melchizedek Mystical Library and the information received, is that there's been 6 immediate activities decreed to be spiritually illegal on Earth. You're going to be pleased to know that the following 6 crimes against humanity are now spiritually unlawful and illegal on Earth. And top of the list, you've probably, for all of you, is satanic ritual abuse. And you're correct, that's the first one that went. The timeline of satanic ritual abuse was sealed as spiritually unlawful last weekend. Okay, and it's ended its energetic scaffolding on Earth. So all those satanic ritual abuse networks that operated through these complex astral technologies, blood magic, and all these intergenerational covenants, to harvest loosh, to harvest life force, to hijack soul fragments, bind children to shadow grids. It's all gone. Okay, these rituals, were the dark forces' very, very effective mechanisms of spiritual enslavement. And with a decree issued, though, that entire scaffolding, the astral nodes, the ritual circles, the sigil codes, the mirror matrices, all of those are now collapsed and have been placed under flame quarantine. So any further attempts to enact satanic ritual abuse is going to result in ritual failure. They're going to try to call the entity that they used for the ritual, and the entity is not going to arrive. And what we're going to see is when they try to perform the ritual, massive, rapid karmic blowback. Okay, the system that they were running it off has lost its anchoring, and the time's over for it. So that's great news. The second thing that's I can announce has been cleaned up is the biotechnical soul fragmentation and DNA tampering that was going on. All of that messing with our DNA templates, right? So all mimic-driven biotech that's attempting to splice or distort or suppress or override the divine human blueprint, right? Now, you'll be pleased to know, yes, this includes weaponized mRNA injections, right? DNA editing tools used to sever soul connections, all frequency-based synthetic implants, soul tagging via nanotech or biometric fields, all these are now spiritually illegal. So, these practices, what they did is they fractured the Trinity bridge between body, soul, and oversoul. And this was severing a human's ability to hear their own source signal. So with this closure sealed out, no synthetic DNA grafting or any soul-splitting program can now successfully bind or override or hijack a Christ-coded being. Right, the experiments are going to fail. All the experiments they're doing at the moment behind the scenes are going to backfire or produce no results. And so we shouldn't see any more of the messing with our DNA templates with new vaccines or other various technologies coded to help us under the guise of the extraction. Right, so flame-coded children are going to be immune to all of this targeting now. It's going to be over. This grid is now closed. The third thing that's happened is the child exploitation cartels and all the black market adoption rings. That timeline's closed out as well. The long-standing spiritual permission that allowed children to be stolen and to be sold and adopted into these mimic bloodlines or trafficked through the state and private systems, all of those rings thrived by using these false guardianship contracts. That's how it could go on. They had these false spiritual contracts in place on the spiritual plane that allowed this to happen. All the falsified identity paths, astral misdirection, all the soul capture technologies that were going on, that's blinded the public's awareness to all of this existence. And so with this sealing happened, children are now under Krystic protection through a direct oversoul firewall. That means any tracking, any grooming, any trafficking grids are breaking right now in real time, right? The mimic contracts no longer hold. Flame children are going to become invisible to these exploitive networks. And the legal systems and soul systems are going to start surfacing these crimes against humanity. We're going to start to see a planetary reckoning coming on as this becomes aware. More and more people will become aware of it as we start to get legal retribution for what's taken place. The fourth thing that's dropped down is the Monarch Delta mind control architecture. That's these Monarch and Delta programs is what drives the MK Ultra and all the various offshoots. And what these programs did is that they created programs where they would create trauma fracturing and all this dissociative state training between a handler and a subject to psychically control and program them for political, sexual, or spiritual infiltration. And these programs, fractured terribly souls and implanted these mimicked personalities, created these artificial kind of priesthoods that mimicked divine initiation. Sometimes some of these MK Ultra, people who got put through those programs would come out as silent assassination. Suddenly a switch would flick and then suddenly they'd turn into an assassin. That was all done because of the soul fracturing and trauma fracturing that would get done in these programs to allow very deeply embedded commands to go into their system. So with this decree issued, that mind control grid has lost its coherence. Subjects that were once bound by handler contracts are now going to start to regain memory, merging fragments and breaking the conditioning, right? Their fragments are going to start coming together. They're going to start waking up and remembering. And, new initiates now will not be programmed. They will try, but the frequency energy along it, because this is decrees backed by God, God will not allow this to take place anymore. So the flame intelligence is now going to intervene, and any of these split mind rituals and synthetic initiations are going to be overridden. And so a Krystic override will be placed through the limbic pineal field of all those beings who have been invested in all of that. 2 to go. The next one is the harvest-based death economy, right? If you have been observing with any sense of a wider lens, you can see that much of our economy is built on death. This is known as the occult death economy. It's built on death, suffering, and sacrifice. That's used as currency for the ages. We're talking war for profit, right? We're talking about sacrifice-based religion. We're talking about medical harvesting. We're talking about energetic siphoning. All of these things and our whole economy is dependent upon mass human suffering to generate the spiritual fuel for inverted systems. So if you look carefully behind the scenes, the same companies that are the ones that are producing the chemicals that go on the food are the same ones that are having the pharmaceutical solutions on the other side. So that both making us sick as well as, keeping us sick, as well as extracting, profit for both sides of that equation. The entire thing is, held down by this system. And so with the Flame Council seat sealed, that energetic circuitry that turns human pain into spiritual power is now severed, right? The harvest fails. Soul juice no longer flows to them. And the entities that relied on this currency are going to be fragmented or going to be fleeing. I mean, the entire grid systems that funneled this energy into black hole matrices are sealed now and are collapsing. So the death economy is ending and the economy of life is being born. So as we enter the second half of this decade and we start to see things falling apart, celebrate the end of the death economy dissolving. This thing was insidious. And, from that, we're going to start to see a rebuild happen. It's going to take time and it's not necessarily going to be easy, but it's very necessary. Finally, we've got the false messiah program and the mimic flame priesthood. That's gone. So the decree on this one has ended the timeline of false ascended masters, the inverted avatars, mimic priest kings who have used Krystic language and inverted it, the rituals, the revelations. Typically these beings who position themselves as guides or spiritual gurus while leading others into spiritual mimicry. They are mimicking the real thing, but not being the real thing. Unfortunately, on the planet, you take a look at the top 10 spiritual influences on the planet, whoever they might be, are most likely influenced by the mimic field, right? So people who are learning from them, we're not actually getting a real sense of what real spirituality is, right? Many have created these vast followings and, promising transcendence, but they're harvesting attention, harvesting money, harvesting soul light out of their networks and followings. And so with this closure, the mimic throne architecture, it's been overthrown. And so any false flame transmission now is going to collapse in coherence. So some of you who are maybe following certain teachers on the internet are no longer suddenly going to no longer resonate with them and go, don't resonate with that anymore. And you can go, mimic, okay? Mimicking the light, okay? There's a lot of them out there, okay? The flame can no longer be mimicked. Only true resonance is going to be remaining. Now, course, immediately what I asked is, oh, well, what's going to happen if anyone tries these activities again? And so what I've uncovered is that when the Ark Council Flame Throne issues a decree, it's a spiritual law, right? And actually what's happened is it is enforced by the core mechanics of reality. The declarations that get made through oversoul authority reprogram the morphogenic field. And from that moment on, the timelines they govern are no longer optional or up for debate, right? They are enacted. So what does this mean practically and spiritually for those that are trying to still mess around in the darkness and start to carry out some of these inverted acts? Well, the first thing is that the mimic architecture dissolves, right? Any of these 6 violations that I've mentioned that have been decreed into law, whether that's trafficking or ritual abuse or genetic hacking, these were never just a physical act. They were made possible by the unseen energetic architecture underneath. The covenants, the contract grids, the siphoning circuits, and the astral mirrors that gave this system the stickiness, right? This was the energetic scaffolding that held these acts in place and allowed them to spread, to repeat, and to be fed. But now once this decree has been spoken and sealed, these scaffolds that hold it together have collapsed. And so the architecture loses its coherence, right? Any timelines that they're trying to drive are going to lose its thrust. And the acts become anchorless, right? They're still going to be attempted, don't get me wrong, but the force is gone. The dark magic ritual, the black magic ritual behind it, right, is gone. The ritual still occurs, but it fails to land. Right, and if we're talking about science in a lab, right, with experimentation on human DNA, the experiment is run, but the base code fragments are missing, right? So it's not going to work. The theft proceeds, but the soul's retracting. So basically, the spell's broken, and the outcome does not imprint. They might try, and they're going to probably try a few times until they work out it's not working, and then we're going to see what happens. But what's really interesting is karma accelerates in real time. Before, karmic backlash happened over decades, maybe lifetimes, and different incarnational loops. There was quite a large distance between action and consequence. And this is why it seemed so unfair to many of us, right? These elites are getting away with these unspeakable crimes and nothing in the world would happen to them, at least as far as what we could see, right? I mean, who agrees with that? Give me a thumbs up in the comments. I mean, these people are getting away with all sorts of nasty things and nothing will seem to be happening. Now, the good thing is that distance is gone, right? Attempting any of these distortions after this has been sealed, which it has been sealed, triggers instantaneous karmic snapback. What does that mean? The oversoul field is no longer going to permit delay. This means we can expect perpetrators to unravel in real time, physically, mentally, spiritually, very quickly after the act. First up, they're going to do the act, they're going to do the ritual or the experiment, and then it's not going to work, and then all of a sudden karmic boomerang comes back around in hours or days. So you can imagine some people are going to be in for a rude shock in the coming weeks as they try another dark ritual, only to have it blow up in their face. And all the karma that they were offsetting comes back to them in real time. So I think that's a good thing. The rituals and experiments, they're going to unbind. So they were working on certain summoning protocols, cloaking intent, hijacking reality. They were designed to summon and power, and these old protocols that they're operating on no longer function as intended. That means the dark rituals lose their resonance. No entities are going to arrive when they summon them, right? They're going to start the party and then they're going to be the only one there. None of the usual crew are going to come because the ceremonial portals remain closed. And then if we're talking about, say, experiments using genetic tampering, they're going to begin to malfunction, right? The experiments with DNA starts destabilizing. The results nullify. Test subjects may begin awakening, no longer consenting. The energy harvests amongst it all produce nothing. The psychic siphons will leak or implode. So what we're talking about here is the literal collapse of the underworld operating system. and it's about time, to be honest with you. I think we're all sick of it. All these unsavory practices going on, time's over. And so we're going to start to see flame intelligence intervening. So what happens is that the Ark Council releases non-violent enforcers of source law. These are known as flame sentinels. These are organic intelligences, flame and sentinels. They're not like some sort of winged myth creature or external saviors. They're just consciousness fractals of source. And they get put in to these key points on the grids and spiritual domains that will end up short-circuiting, various handlers or mimic technology or experiments or rituals in real time. It's these flame sentinels that will collapse the rituals and the astral clone backups. It's the flame sentinels that are going to protect our children, are going to protect our guardians, protect the vault lines, protect sovereign families. Where these flame sentinels stand, no mimic script can take a hold. So that's what we're going to start seeing now, is divine intervention through the flame intelligences known as the flame sentinels. And finally, spiritual governance, it's no longer inverted. We've had this inversion for so long. So I think, this is to be celebrated. Real spiritual law now can be enacted with spiritual consequences. The false kings have been dethroned. The mimic priesthoods are dissolving. And all the counterfeit thrones of illusion are losing their power. Authority no longer flows through the hierarchy, through manipulation. It's no longer holding through hidden contracts. It emanates solely through oversoul flame embodiment. And those seated in this field don't war by decree, but hold reality through their consciousness as a lawful resonance. What we're going to start to see is, in more time, more beings holding Krystic Oversoul are going to start taking their rightful seats. And as this starts to happen, more seats across different areas of society are going to be held in Krystic presence, with Source, Mother, Father, God, being able to work through them, right? And so what's exciting is that the presence restores coherence to the hologram. And so the claiming of the seat's important. The Ark Council Flame Throne, it's restored divine sequencing. It's re-establishing which beings may hold, anchor, or transmit time codes, soul access, or planetary governance. So I think it's, a very major upgrade. I think it's exciting for our planet that a lot of these dark timelines are closing. And, we are standing at the threshold of a new epoch, not just of hope or healing, but actually now of real enforcement. The days of endless processing, waiting for these systems to self-correct, or trying to claim justice without authority are over. Now, justice can be claimed because authority is back. Ark Council Flame Throne is reseated, and the architecture of Krystic governance is alive. Source law is no longer a philosophy. It's a living decree. And what has been declared unlawful in the higher courts of causality can no longer be sustained in the densest realms of Earth. Now, rituals, they still may be attempted, and certain programs may splutter forward, but they're going to fail to anchor, and karmic return is going to be immediate. The harvest that they're trying to get is going to be void, and the mimic field that's running it is going to fold. And so the era of crimes against humanity is coming to an end. Over the weeks, watch out in the media, expect more areas that I've listed above to be made spiritually unlawful. I'll announce them as they come. And it's the beginning of a tremendous spiritual cleanup as the inversion becomes cleansed and corrected. So expect fallout, expect acceleration, expect seemingly things that would never be made possible come to the light of the media might come to light. Now, over the next 5 years, this timeline is going to be governed by flame law, and it's going to create these massive, massive systemic shifts, both spiritually and systematically. Now, you bake into the cake that this year we've had all of the outer planets go through in their astrological movement. Right? It's very rare that you get all the outer planets moving through into a new sign within 12, 18 months of each other. We've got that this year, right? We've got the Neptunes that are moving. We've got these outer planets that are changing. So all of that means that literally baked into God's cosmic clock is change, right? Set in motion with it. Okay, so we've got that, and the throne's being reclaimed. We're going to start to see the collapse of these mimic scaffolds, and the once held global stability of influence, of hierarchy, of control, of ritual that was driving the entire thing is going to start collapsing. Here's what to watch for. Okay, you're going to start to see false light leaders, public figures operating under, say, mimic priesthoods or false messiah programs. They're going to begin to lose their coherence. They'll start contradicting themselves, maybe even experience sudden exposure. You're going to just not resonate with these types of people who are in the false light anymore. They might attempt to rebrand or morph, but the field is no longer going to support glamour. Okay, that's gone. We're going to start to see religion and spiritual institutions polarize. Those that are unwilling to, relinquish themselves from these distorted hierarchies are going to become more and more irrelevant. And in the beginning, we're going to start to see these little Krystic hubs. Small, unassuming in the beginning, flame-backed though. And these little communities around are going to start to replace the big spiritual hierarchies of organized religion as more spiritual way stations for the next age. We're going to start to see these spaces and places around the earth of these communities holding the flame start to build resonance in time. We'll start to see the black economic system start to unravel. So, yep, that's the economic system. Remember, the economy is built on death. That's the death economy. This loose-based energy harvesting, soul trafficking, synthetic financial grids that drives it all. They're going to lose their capacity to charge and anchor timelines. So the BlackRocks of the world and their, supercomputer Aladdin, which holds the financial timelines in place, they're going to start to lose their capacity to hold the financial timeline. Okay, so expect shifts in financial systems, expect whistleblowers, implosions of hidden markets. You might start to see revelations involving child exploitation, biotech weaponry, all of that might start to come to the surface. And amongst all of this, you'll start to see new souls are going to start to emerge visibly on your radar. Suddenly you might come into contact with material like this, or other beings who are holding flame-backed material. Their voices, might sound simple at first, but what you're going to tune into is the energy behind their words. It's the coherence that's going to override consciousness in rooms, right? And so all these, the flame sentinels will come around these beings who are teaching from flame, right? These people will be protected. And we're going to start to see the scientific veil of illusion that's across so many humans that, if science says it's true, it must be true, right? Start to lift. The veil is going to lift on it, right? We're going to start to see consciousness sciences and organic energetic technology and Krystic quantum frameworks are going to start coming into mainstream awareness, not through fame or from people who have already got platforms, but through grounded, coherence, right? We're going to see these breakthroughs that bypass the academic system and corporate control and come from the grassroots up. And finally, redemptive pathways are going to widen. Watch out for unexpected reversals. Perpetrators may awaken, confess, begin walking timelines of repair because they understand that, I'm dealing with my eternal soul. And if I don't do something now, my eternal soul will carry it for eternity. These won't just be performative repentance. It'll actually be soul-wrenching for them. They'll recognize what they've done because they can wake up from it, because the morphogenic field that held them so tightly into the lineage, or whether it's a Luciferian lineage or the satanic lineage, there'll be exit pathways to be able to get out. They won't be so bound tight. So all in all, I think pretty exciting time. This is one of the first Krystic seats to actually begin implementation of its governance structures. And, this is a very positive thing. And this is only the first of many of the Krystic governance structures that are now online and being enacted. And so this particular seating, right, is exciting, right? We've got this entire wave that's going to happen. This is only the first one, the Ark Council Flame Throne, which backs up spiritual law and divine law and the enforcement of those. That is seated, and the first 6 things have been spoken into being. Satanic ritual abuse, okay? Biological soul fragmentation and DNA tampering, child exploitation, right? We've got also the mind control architectures, the harvest-based death economy, and the false messiah programs, all spiritually illegal. That's enough from me. Hope you enjoyed this week's update. Look forward to seeing what comes next week. But in the meantime, I'm sending you all of my unconditional love.